Motivation in learning and teaching. Before we start, picture yourself as a teacher in a classroom with students at various learning levels and from diverse backgrounds. How will you ensure that all students are motivated to learn? What strategies will you use to capture and maintain their interest? Consider this scenario throughout this presentation. So what is motivation? According to psychologists, it is an internal state that arouses, directs, and maintains behavior. In fact, psychologists have been interested in the concept of motivation as it greatly affects our decisions in life. In educational psychology, they have made two distinctions: intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is motivation associated with activities that are their own reward. So, for example, you would study French as a second language on your own time with the intention of studying abroad or even taking a job in Nice, France. Whereas extrinsic motivation is motivation created by external factors such as rewards and punishments. In this case, you would study French as a second language as it is a requirement of the International Baccalaureate program to graduate. Therefore, one can determine which one is which based on the cause of one's behavior. Psychologists have also classified 5 approaches or views of motivation. The 5 include behavioral, humanistic, cognitive, social, and sociocultural, all of which have a source of motivation, important influences, and key theorists. Here are the important influences of each. First, the behavioral approaches to motivation deals with the concepts of reinforcers, rewards, incentives, and punishers. Second, the humanistic approaches to motivation cover the concepts of needs for self-esteem, self-fulfillment, and self-determination. Third, the cognitive approaches to motivation deal with the ideas of beliefs, attributions for success and failure, and expectations. Fourth, the social cognitive approaches to motivation go over the ideas of goals, expectations, intentions, and self-efficacy. Finally, the sociocultural approaches to motivation refer to engaged participation in learning communities and maintaining identity through participation in activities of group.
Let's talk about needs. What are needs? Needs are the physical, psychological, and social things that we need, want, and desire in order to be fulfilled, healthy, and fully functioning. For our purposes here in educational psychology, we should be concerned specifically with what do students need to be successful in schools, as well as what do we as teachers need to ensure students learn and are successful. Finally, we should also consider what do parents need in order for their children to be successful in school. Needs theory was popularized by American psychologist Abraham Maslow, who fully expressed this theory in his 1956 book titled Motivation and Personality. In short, Maslow's theory presents several layers or levels of needs, beginning with the most basic physiological needs needed for survival. Moving on up, we find safety and security needs, social needs such as for friendship, belongingness, and family, the esteem or psychological needs for self-esteem, confidence, and achievement, and finally, the highest level attained is self-actualization, which is for ideas of creativity, problem-solving, authenticity, and spontaneity. As you may expect, there are a number of needs that students must fulfill in order to be successful in schools. Another important theory of needs is that of self-determination theory, a framework for the study of human motivation and personality. It is primarily concerned with internal or intrinsic motivation that comes from within the individual, as well as how social and cultural factors facilitate or undermine a person's sense of volition, initiative, well-being, and performance. Self-determination theory outlines that all humans are motivated by 3 fundamental needs, including that for autonomy, or a self-governance, for competence, or the mastery of a certain skill, and relatedness, a sense of belonging. Self-determination and needs theories generally have important implications and applications for education, sport and physical activity participation, health and medicine, as well as parenting and close relationships. Taken together, we find that needs theories have important applications for motivating students to be successful, as well as specific applications for differentiated instruction and special education by meeting students' needs, offering alternatives, and supporting their strengths as well as their weaknesses.
How will you capture and maintain your students' interest in learning? To explore this question, let's first look at two kinds of interests: personal and situational. Personal interests are individual interests in certain subjects or activities. For example, personal interests can include an enjoyment of sports, music, or technology. Situational interests are short-lived aspects of an activity or materials that capture a student's attention. For example, relating a math problem to a real-world application may create a situational interest. It is important to connect academic content to personal and situational interests wherever possible. Greater interest is connected to higher achievement in learning. But how? Here are some ideas to create student interest in learning. Think about how you might use these ideas in your classroom. First, learn about your students' interests and find ways to incorporate them in your lessons. Second, offer choice as a way of tapping into students' interests. For example, allow students to select a novel, science topic, or company to analyze for purposes of an assignment. Third, help students understand the concepts you are teaching by using examples that are meaningful to them. Fourth, find ways to relate the material you are teaching to real-life issues that will be meaningful to students. Fifth, foster curiosity. For example, ask students to predict what will happen in a novel, film, or experiment. And finally, find ways to help students experience success. Interest increases when students feel confident. How do emotions relate to motivation and learning? As teachers, we are concerned about achievement emotions. These are emotions related to achievement in school. Anxiety is an achievement emotion that can interfere with a student's ability to focus, learn, and achieve. So how can you help an anxious student? Here are some things to keep in mind. First, anxiety impacts students differently. Talk to the student to find out the cause and how it is interfering with achievement. Second, remove uncertainty and unnecessary pressure by, for example, always providing clear instructions. Third, encourage anxious students to participate in class discussions by, for example, breaking questions down and giving prompts. Fourth, give students the option of doing presentations in front of smaller groups instead of the whole class. And finally, make sure all students have ample opportunities to be successful.
My name is Stephen, and I will be discussing motivation to learn in school. Motivation to learn is defined as a student tendency to find academic activities meaningful and worthwhile and to try to derive the intended academic benefits from them. As teachers, we have three major jobs to do in terms of motivating students. The first one being get students productively involved with the work of the class, basically catch their interest to motivate them. Number two is develop in our students enduring individual interests and instill motivation so they will be able to educate themselves the rest of their lives. And three, cognitively engage our students. We want our students leaving the class thinking deeply of what was taught. The essential question in this chapter is, how do we motivate students? Carol Ames has identified 6 areas in which teachers make decisions that influence students' ability to learn. The acronym TARGET is used to organize these 6 areas of teacher influence. The T in the target is for task. The value of a task is assessed by its importance, usefulness, and the cost in terms of effort and time to achieve it. Expectation of success is assessed by a student's perception of the difficulty of a task. Generally, a middle level of difficulty is optimal for students. Too easy and the task seems a waste of time, and too hard and the task seems unlikely for the student to succeed. Authenticity refers to how much a task relates to real-life experience of students. The more it does, the more it can build on students' interests and goals, and the more meaningful and motivating it becomes. Autonomy. Motivation is enhanced if students feel a degree of autonomy or responsibility for a learning task. Autonomy strengthens self-efficacy and self-determination, two valued and motivating attitudes described earlier in this chapter. Where possible, teachers can enhance autonomy by offering students choices about assignments. Examples: multiple attempts to success, by encouraging them to take initiative about their own learning. Recognition. Teachers can support students' motivation by recognizing their achievements appropriately. Much depends, however, on how this is done. Praise sometimes undermines performance. It is not especially effective if praise is very general and lacking in detailed reasons for the praise. Grouping. Motivation is affected by how students are grouped together for their work. There are many ways to group students, but they tend to fall into three types: cooperative, competitive, and individualistic. In cooperative learning, a set of students work together to achieve a common goal. In competitive learning, students work individually and their grades reflect comparisons among the class. In individualistic learning, students work by themselves, but their grades are unrelated to their performance of their classmates. Research that compares these three forms of grouping tends to favor cooperative learning. Evaluation. A focus on competitive grouping will have a large effect on evaluation. It can distract students from thinking about the material to be learned and to focus instead on how they'll be graded. A focus on cooperative learning, on the other hand, can have double-edged effects. Some compromise between cooperative and individualistic structures seem to create optimal motivation for learning. And lastly, time. Students learn at their own pace. Accommodating the differences can be challenging, but also important for maximizing students' motivation. A degree of flexibility is usually possible, although it may be difficult at times.
So initially we asked you to envision yourself as a teacher in a classroom with students at various learning levels and diverse backgrounds. And we wanted to know, how were you going to ensure that each student was motivated? Now that we have defined motivation, offered various approaches to explain it, explored theories around it, and underlined practical implications, we want to know, will your teaching practice change in any way? We just wanted to thank you for watching our presentation on motivation in learning and teaching, and hope that you've learned something different.